Hey everyone, so I got a video for you today. This was originally recorded back on February 9th, 2019 at the Davos meeting in Geneva, Switzerland, hosted by the World Economic Forum. This talk is called Tackling the Growth Paradox, and it's hosted by Ali Velshi. And you're going to see in the panel discussion here some dissertations and explanations from Guy Standing, Chrystia Freeland, Larry Fink, Dan Schulman, and Rich Lesser. Now, what we have here is just Chrystia Freeland's talking points. I've cut this down because I didn't want to deter too much. I want you guys to hear what she has to say. She's going to speak about her book. She's going to speak about the third industrial revolution. She's going to talk a little bit about communism, and she's going to talk about trade and GDP and how the public sector, government, interacts with business. Now, I'm going to show you something here. I'm going to transition scenes. Just hang in there for a minute. So one thing I would like to suggest while you're watching this video is compare these answers that were given in 2019 prior to a lot of the things that have happened over the last 2 years, and then compare them to now and how things are happening now. Just a quick disclaimer, this video is not meant to insult or defame anyone. This is more or less for educational and news purposes. Following our unedited segments, I'll let you decide how to think and how to feel.
There are a whole lot of people, I've seen it on my social media feed, from people saying, first of all, why are you there? And secondly, you really think they're solving the problems for us? But the beauty of being here is you get government and industry and academia together to at least discuss some of these things. Minister Freeland, you understand the concept of a plutocracy well, because I think that was the title of your book.
That's true.
Plutocrats.
Yeah.
But you have gone from my field of financial journalism into government, where you get to look at this firsthand. To some degree, you don't see the extent of it in Canada as you do in other countries, but you see the trend very clearly.
For sure, and you are right, Ali, that I wrote a book called Plutocrats. I remember interviewing Larry for it, and when I first told him what my thesis was, which is the rise of the global super elite and the fall of everybody else, Larry was a little bit anxious about the thesis. But I think we'll hear what he has to say about it in a minute. Look, I think that this is a really important discussion to be having, and I'm glad that Guy laid out his thesis first and his work, because he really has done pioneering work in this area. And I think where we need to start is this is not about just feelings that the middle class has in Western industrialized countries. This is about reality. And I think there can be a tendency, especially among those of us who have been the winners in how the economy has shaken out, to say it's just about perceptions people have and feelings, and actually things are pretty great. Just look at the GDP numbers. I think the starting point has to be exactly where Guy began, which is to acknowledge that global capitalism in Western industrialized countries and Western democracies over the past 40 years has not been delivering for the middle classes in our countries. And there are variations between countries. Ali is quite right. The hollowing out of the middle class is not as severe in Canada as it is, for example, in the United States, but the trend lines are happening everywhere. You know, they're happening in France with its extensive social safety net. They're happening in Sweden. And we really need to be frank and honest about that. And I say that as a person who really believes in capitalist democracy. As a student, I live in the actual Soviet Union. So I am pretty aware that central planning and communist dictatorship are not good places to live. But those of us who believe in capitalist democracy, and I very much count myself in that number, we have the first obligation to be pointing out what the problems are. I also agree with Guy that we need to see this as a pretty acute thing. And we need to connect this conversation with another conversation a lot of people are having in a lot of countries about where is this angry, often nativist populism coming from, which seems to be ripping through like wildfire so many Western democracies. My own view is the real root of it is the hollowing out of the middle class. The fact that people are concerned about their own jobs. They're really concerned about what kind of a future their kids are going to have. They're worried about their retirement. And if you are a politician, and I am a politician now, that kind of anxiety that people have, one thing you can do with it is you can harness it to get elected. And the easiest direction to harness it, the easiest direction to ride that angry horse is in the direction of hostility towards immigrants, in the direction of blaming those nefarious foreigners who have done those bad trade deals with you. It's always easiest to blame the other. And I think, at a very sort of broad brush way, this is something we're seeing in a lot of countries, and it is profoundly destabilizing to many democracies, and actually it threatens us all because I think it's threatening the rules-based international order. So that's all very depressing. I do think that we can fix it. And I think we, and speaking as a politician, we ran in 2015, the Liberals in Canada, on a middle class platform. And actually a lot of people thought my leader, Justin Trudeau, was crazy. They said the Canadian middle class is fine. But he had been talking to a lot of people, and he heard people were anxious. And he said, I'm gonna listen, and we're gonna try to get this right. And I don't think, Ellie, I think we're gonna have a great conversation. I don't think we're gonna come up with a blueprint for all countries and all places today. But I just want to offer one hopeful historical parallel, which is I think that there is a real parallel with the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century. That was also a time when you saw tremendous technological progress, when you saw a real globalization of the economy, when you saw overall, we were really the industrialized countries really had tremendous economic growth. They also had tremendous inequality. They also had real anxiety among a lot of people. And the bad news is that anxiety ultimately ended up with 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and a communist revolution in Russia and China. So that wasn't good. But what people also figured out after those intense traumas was we have to do something about it. We have to find a way to harness the tremendous fruits of the Industrial Revolution to serve the whole of our societies. In the United States, it was called the New Deal. And I think that is chiefly a political project, but it's a project that only works if business really decides rather than fighting it. Remember, Roosevelt said, they hate me and I embrace their hatred. I think we need to be in a moment where it is a joint project of government and business, because you guys are going to be in real trouble if we can't fix this. And I think, we did it before, we can do it again. Hopefully we don't have to go through as much trauma before we realize that we really need to act.
Mr. Freeland, thank you for that. Minister Freeland, you have the privilege of living between these. Well, I tell you, his stuff is worth reading. It's really good. At least you'll understand the terms. Mr. Freeland, you've had the really interesting perspective of being where I am, where you talk to folks like this, forward-thinking business leaders. I will say, if I were watching this panel, my criticism would be, hey, World Economic Forum, that's terrific. You lined up the progressive, forward-thinking business leaders. They're not all like that, by the way. But you also are in public service, and you've been a journalist. So you get to sort of see if you can marry these two worlds. These guys see a world in which they can have influence, and by the way, they can have a lot of influence, and that they can help put right. Guy sees a social structure that is dangerously coming apart, and he uses the word dangerous in what happens to a population that feels so left out and left behind. And then you're in a place where you have to create policy. When you and I started in this business, trade was maybe 20% of the global economy. Now it's probably 60, and it's about 100% of your job these days, even as a foreign minister, because you've been in the middle of these trade wars that are in some cases hurting the economy, but they're also the globalization that Rich talks about is what a lot of people think trade is. So you're in the middle of all this. How do you solve it?
Okay, so maybe I should start from the fact that I am a Canadian and a Liberal politician. So my instinct and inclination is always to find the common ground. That's maybe a definition of the Canadian national mission. So let me try to do that. And we did a little bit of that in the NAFTA negotiation, too. I kind of agree with everybody. The only thing I would disagree with is Larry's description of me as a pessimist. I vehemently disagree with that. I would describe myself as a realistic optimist. Okay. And I'll just make a couple of points. I'll start on trade. I do think one of the reasons we need to get right how capitalism delivers for our own middle classes is if we fail to do that, we will lose the agreement of our people for us to do trade. And that will be a really significant own goal. And we're already seeing in a lot of countries, because when people are seeing that they're losing their jobs, they look for someone to blame. And some irresponsible politicians, I would say, see that as an instinct that you can harness and use and point at the culprits. I am talking in very general terms. And it's really easy for the culprit. It's really easy for the culprit to be a foreigner. Foreigners don't vote in your own elections. And you know, in Canada, we are a trading nation. About 60% of our GDP, trade accounts for about 60% of our GDP. We're very committed to it. We know we have to be, because that's where the good middle class jobs are, and jobs in the tradable sector are actually better paying than in the non-traded sectors. We get that. But we also know Canadians need to support trade for us to keep on doing it. It's one of the reasons we're so committed to the middle class agenda. And to prove my optimism to Larry, I want to say it can be done. So right now, I think a lot of people would categorize this as an era of anti-globalization, anti-trade. Well, in the past 2 years, Canada has renegotiated NAFTA with you guys. We have done a trade deal with Europe, CETA, and we have done a trade deal with the Asia Pacific, CPTPP. Canada is now the only G7 country that has a trade deal with every other G7 country. And I think a big reason why Canadians support that, and they support it very broadly, is we are focused on the middle class and on the middle class agenda. The only other thing I would say, sort of apart from trade, is just to add a new element to our conversation that I know everyone here has been thinking about, is we need to realize that some of the processes we've been talking about in terms of what happens to jobs, they are only accelerating. Because I think that we're at a moment when the technology revolution is actually accelerating in terms of its impact on a lot of jobs. And Rich alluded to that. You know, in 25 years, how many people are going to have a job as a truck driver? There's a great Canadian company outside Regina called Seedmaster that is developing a self-driving tractor platform. My dad's a farmer, so he thinks it's great. But you know, that's another place where we see fewer jobs. I think that AI is going to start moving into, again, as Rich alluded, into a lot of the service jobs.
Maybe CEOs will make that.
I'm not even going to go there. You know, so that is going to make people anxious.
Don't get us too optimistic.
And we need to be thinking about a plan for people. We need to be sure that we offer people hope, that we offer people confidence, and we offer them assurances that government is going to be there to be with them in this process, because no one knows where it's going to lead. And also, and here I am, like, really reassured to hear you guys, that business leaders, that the people who are the winners from all of these transformations actually understand they have a responsibility to everybody else. And that is a really important transformation. A couple of you guys have referred to, you know, moving away from the idea that your only responsibility is to your shareholders. And I think that is a crucial shift, and it's something which is pretty new. I think it's something that we really need to support, because this is going to be a really big, it already is, and I think it will become an even more complicated transition. And the societies and the countries that succeed are going to be the ones that are realistic about the challenge, where there is a really united team spirit about meeting it.
I got 10 minutes. I want to see if there's some questions. I'm with you. I didn't name the panel either. Chrystia?
Okay, well, I'll make a very final concluding comment. Larry told a great story about the founding of his company and the meritocracy there. And I really believe that actually one of the things about the tremendous growth we've had in Western industrialized economies of the past 30 years has been kind of an unleashing of meritocracy. But there's a paradox there, because if you are a CEO who's in Davos because you're a meritocrat and you did it because of your hard work and your brilliance, and I think you did, there can be a risk that you don't worry so much about people who weren't so lucky or for whatever reason. And I think one of the central challenges of this world of income inequality, where there is a plutocracy, where there is a super elite, is for the people who've done really, really well. And because of good fortune, for sure, because of accidents of birth, but also because they worked really hard and they had a great idea. Those people, all of you guys, it's so essential that a powerful responsibility be felt for the whole society. And there be an understanding that, yeah, you did it yourself, but you only did it yourself because you're part of a broader society and you have a huge responsibility.
Totally agree.
We'll leave it there.